It's pretty safe to say that overall, when it came to giving the Espada backstories and depth, Kubo was a little bit inconsistent, with some characters getting a sizable amount of history and detail, and others getting absolutely nothing. For example, characters like Grimjo and Neutra both get pretty sizable, beefy backstories that go into not only their relationships, but also crucially their overall standing in the world of Hueco Mundo. Whereas other characters like Ulquiorra, who is incredibly important overall, get absolutely nothing when it comes to the canon manga, the serialized manga. They get absolutely nothing. And this is true with the top 3 Espada as well. Both Stark and Barragan are treated to some form of backstory, but poor old Harribel, the 3rd Espada, gets nothing at all. So it's pretty good then that we had the anime to help us fill in the blanks, and while this is the anime, so therefore it's technically not canon material, as far as I'm concerned, it's probably the best we're ever going to get. And so in this video, we're going to be taking a look at Harribel's backstory as it is portrayed in the anime and given to us there. Going to take a look at her, some of the characters she interacts with, and just the world of Hueco Mundo as it's presented to us before Aizen has had a chance to take over. Before we begin, however, guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button now and stay up to date with Bleach content like this every single week. And also, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a like as well, as it really does help increase the exposure of that video and just make sure that more Bleach fans like yourself get a chance to see it. And of course, I really appreciate it as well. And of course, if you want to support me just that little step further, we do have a Patreon for the channel as well now, where if you like what I do here, you can support me for as little as $1 a month. You can get videos early, and also I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has supported me there so far. I really appreciate it. So like I said, we get treated to literally nothing as far as backstory goes for Harribel in the canon manga. After Aizen dispatches with her, after Stark and Barragan have both died, she just sort of disappears and only reappears right in the beginning of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, only to never be seen again. This doesn't mean that Harribel is completely out of luck, however. Her character is fleshed out a little bit more in the Nestle Tonight supplementary story, but also in Can't Fear Your Own World as well. She plays a pretty sizable role there. However, in terms of the serialized manga, she gets no real depth whatsoever, and we find out that her aspect of death is sacrifice, but really, with so little context, it was hard to really understand what it meant, and hard to really find meaning in it at all. Yes, all 3 of her fraction were defeated, and she seemed to take it a little bit harder than someone like Barragan, who is of course a tyrant. But at the same time, he lost all of his fraction as well, as did virtually every other Espada who had them, so that wasn't unique to her. Luckily, the anime did come about and give us a backstory for her, which also helped flesh out what this aspect really meant to her. Now, this backstory actually also shows us some of the lives of Harribel's 3 fraction as well, the Tres Bestias. And it begins by showing us Emilu Apache, who is on the run from a hollow. And of course, at this point in the story, she is not yet an Arrancar. She is in fact an Adhuchas class hollow, and we get to see her proper animalistic shape, and she does look pretty cool. Their designs are something I'll go into in a second. But she's actually on the run from another Adhuchas class, Menos, who's trying to devour her. And she seems to sort of essentially give up, thinking that she can't defeat him, and this hollow's like, you know, I'll eat you and I'll devour your consciousness and I'll grow stronger and continue on up the food chain. Of course, that's essentially the law of the land here in Hueco Mundo, especially pre-Aizen's reign. So Apache is basically about to give up when, of course, she is saved by the arrival of Harribel, and Harribel looks really cool. I think this is a great design. What's really neat about this, of course, is that she is pretty quickly confirmed to be a Vasto Lord class Menos, which is the most powerful of the hollow growth chart, essentially. And I like this because we never really get to see this in the manga itself. You never really see too many named hollows pre-Arrancarization. And so I like the fact that we actually get to see a Vasto Lord, because obviously once they've had their masks broken by the Hogyoku, they all mostly take on human-like characteristics, but I like seeing this prior to that, because we actually really get to see what separates a Vasto Lord from the rest of the Hollows. Harribel is small, human-like, but there are elements of her shark-like being still attached to her, and overall it is a really cool design that, in my opinion, just sort of screams power, especially when you see her just completely annihilate this monstrous Hollow, because, you know, the majority of Menos, especially Adhuchas class Hollows, they do take on these animalistic forms, and when one Hollow arrives who looks very humanoid, you know they mean serious business, and we get that with Harribel, and I like to see that prior to Aizen's ascension in Hueco Mundo. And it's just cool because I feel like we never really got to see a true Vasto Lord class Menos in the field prior to the Hogyoku. So Apache is ordered to come with Harribel, and she introduces her to Milarose and Sun. In my opinion, Sun has the best design out of the three of them in terms of their Adhuchas class looks. The snake look just works really well, and I think she does look really cool overall. Milarose's design is okay, it's probably in the middle for me. I think the head piece kind of looks a bit weird, but she does kind of look like a statue, which I think is pretty cool. It obviously really gets across that whole feral and animalistic side to her. And then Apache's is probably my least favourite of the three. I don't think it quite comes together all that well. It doesn't quite coalesce as well as the others do. It looks like it's kind of made up of odd parts, but it looks alright. They all look fine. Harribel is the real winner here in terms of her design overall, and I think that's obviously crucial to, you know, really getting across just how powerful she actually is. And so pretty quickly we see that these guys, particularly Harribel, do not subscribe to the normal way a Hollow should live. And this is something that has permeated through their characters into the main storyline as well, which I like a lot. Harribel has always been shown to be unnaturally level-headed, very calm, very collected, and certainly more human than animal in the way she acts, which of course goes well with the fact that she's a Vasto Lord. But even compared to like Baragon, who, you know, he's not the most collected individual, Harribel has always come across that way. That's why she's so suited to be the ruler of Hueco Mundo in the current timeline. But Harribel basically says that female Hollows tend to be easy prey for the male ones, and so they really should be banding together to fight back and survive in this completely lawless desert. Later on, they do come across another male Hollow who I can only assume tried to attack them, and they fought back. They injure him, but they don't kill him. And Apache is kind of like, you know, why don't you subscribe to the law of the land? You know, we could have killed him, we could have become stronger. And we get some of Harribel's mindset now. We kind of start to see where her aspect of death comes from. She basically says, I don't want to become stronger by sacrificing others. That's not how I want to live. So she's happy essentially just surviving without creating more casualties in the world of Hueco Mundo. So already she's, you know, very forward thinking for a Hollow. And this is something that would probably serve Hueco Mundo well in the future. But when talking about the future of Hueco Mundo, we obviously must acknowledge the past. And Hueco Mundo's past is fascinating to me, and I love this glimpse we get here in the anime where they are brought before King Baragon Luisenbahn and his court, essentially. And I like this because Baragon and his men are clearly portrayed as rough. These, you know, they're ruthless, they're violent, they're cruel. They very much think they are in control of the entire land. But what I find to be very cool about this is that despite their you know, just being monstrous beings, it's really fascinating that even here, prior to Aizen, and his attempt to almost force civilization onto these animal-like creatures, Baragon actually facilitated some form of civilization very early on. And of course we do see this in the canon manga as well, when Baragon rules in his ceilingless castle, which Tozen tries to mock. And Baragon's like, well, all of the sky of Hueco Mundo is my castle roof. But we get another look at that here, and it's just so fascinating to me that despite their ways, despite how kind of wicked they all are, they do come together to form this almost like this mock kingdom, essentially, which I think works really well. And you can assume that they are all doing so because of Baragon's immense strength. He is the kind of gravitational pull that brings these disparate creatures in and whips them into shape, essentially. We get a really nice moment here, though. Baragon and Harribel clearly already know each other, and that makes total sense. You know, Vasto Lord are very few and far between, and if somebody like Baragon thinks he can rule all of this desolate wasteland, hopefully unchallenged, he is obviously going to have had a run-in with the more powerful Hollows at some point, but obviously Harribel wants nothing to do with this. You get the sense, potentially, that Baragon is, you know, maybe not necessarily fearful, but concerned of her strength, and he's the one being provocative. But he basically says to her, he's like, you know, I've had enough of your rebellious attitude in my kingdom. So I'm going to give you two choices, Harribel. Either you can join my army, you know, and put that strength to good use, or you can disappear to a corner of Hueco Mundo where I can never see you again. However, he then laughs mockingly that, you know, of course, I see all. There is nowhere in this expansive desert that escapes my gaze. So he's basically saying join or die. That's essentially what he is saying. However, this one hammerhead shark Menos kind of gets a little bit too big for his boots, comes down, squares up to Harribel, and he's like, you better do as Lord Baragon says, or it's not going to end well for you. And she's like, kind of get out of my face, and she slices him across the face. It doesn't kill him, but he's severely wounded, and it's at this point Baragon's like, all right, you know, just go. If you leave now, we won't have any trouble. So the four of them all decide to leave, leaving this hammerhead hollow like squirming in pain. We get presumably a small time jump. Doesn't necessarily have to be a lot, but I'm guessing it's an ever so slight one, where we see HARRIBEL'S Fraction all back at the lair, just kind of surviving still, when they're suddenly greeted by an intruder, and someone breaks into the lair with the desire to kill them all, or at least kill Harribel, and it turns out to be the same hammerhead Menos that she struck at Baragon's court. However, this time something is markedly different about this guy. He's no longer enormous and shark-like, he's instead very small. However, he's now humanoid, he's very, buff, muscular, half of his mask is gone, revealing a more human-like mouth, and his Reiatsu is completely off the charts. There's something not quite right here. It's also interesting to note that just before he shows up, the Fraction have something of a prophetic discussion when they mention some mysterious rumours surrounding Baragon and having these cracked masked soldiers beginning to pop up all over Hueco Mundo. And this is, of course, Aizen's doing. He's beginning to move in. And so the Hammerhead Hollow is, just absolutely hates Harribel for totally showing him up in front of Baragon, and he starts attacking all of them. He completely demolishes the Fraction, and he goes up against Harribel herself, and Harribel struggles to defeat him. She then tells the Fraction, leave now, just go, run away. You have, it's all about surviving, and so they do. They take off. They disappear. And Harribel struggles against this guy because, of course, he is unnatural. He's not so much an abomination as he is an evolution. Aizen has used the Hogyoku on this guy to break his mask, turn him into an Arrancar, and forcibly increase his strength. It's kind of interesting to see that I would assume a pretty low-level Arrancar can match a Vasto Lord Menos. It just goes to show you the immeasurable power boost gained by becoming an Arrancar, which is, of course, what Aizen is trying to figure out. As it looks like Harribel is going to lose this fight to the Hammerhead Hollow, her three Fraction return, having decided that, they have found a purpose in following Harribel, following her way of life, and that they are willing to die for her. They are willing to sacrifice themselves for her. Of course, this is another huge part of what really forms Harribel's aspect of death when she becomes an Espada. However, despite their courageous return, they are all defeated once again, and although Harribel manages to land some pretty good hits on this guy, she too is about to die at his hand. Just as he brings down his weapon to finish her off, however, Harribel looks up to see Sosuke Aizen standing above her, grabbing the hammerhead, now Arrancar's weapon. And this is a really great way to end this backstory, because it's really prescient, I think, and they do a couple of cool things here to really preclude towards Aizen's eventual betrayal of Harribel herself. So as he holds this Arrancar's weapon, Aizen sort of calmly says, okay, this is to be expected of the power of an Arrancar. I'm the one who bestowed him these new powers, but unfortunately I didn't give him a brain to be able to wield them cleverly, and he just kills the Arrancar in a single hit. What's really cool about this is the Arrancar dies being like, Aizen, like, really surprised that he's been killed by him. And so, in my opinion, it's pretty safe to assume that Aizen gave this Arrancar some kind of spiel very similar to what he gives to Harribel in a minute when he granted him this new power, and so the Hammerhead Arrancar obviously thought Aizen was on side with him. And so he has been betrayed by him, essentially, and this is of course exactly what will happen to Harribel later on in the future. And I do kind of like that. You can imagine Aizen kind of going around feeding the same lies to almost every single hollow he meets, who he grants new powers. Because at the end of the day, Hueco Mundo is just one huge testing ground for him. All of these hollows are just things to be used, to be experimented upon, and really he was just using this Hammerhead Hollow to see the true power of an Arrancar. But at the same time, although Harribel thinks she has been saved by Aizen, at the end of the day, he was perfectly happy to let this Arrancar go crazy in Hueco Mundo. He just didn't want to lose Harribel because she's a valuable asset, being a Vasto Lord, but really he was happy for her to be a guinea pig, for a short while at least anyway. Having killed the Hammerhead Arrancar, however, Aizen turns to Harribel and talks to her of what it means to sacrifice something and what the concept of sacrifice actually means. And Aizen basically says to her, if you want to be able to protect those close to you, you should join me, and I can give you a new power. And of course, she and her 3 Fraction all do. All of them are turned into Arrancar by the Hogyoku, and Harribel becomes the 3rd Espada of Aizen's army. Overall, it's a pretty inoffensive backstory. It doesn't do anything too crazy, which I think makes a lot of sense for something that is anime only. They obviously didn't want to go too off the wall in case they affected the canon storyline in any way. That's why I think this is kept relatively small scale. They do a couple of things nice though, like introducing Baragon and his court in this as well, to show how he affects Hueco Mundo, this primordial age of Hueco Mundo and those around him. You get a nice moment where Aizen, Gin and Tozen arrive dressed in their captain's clothes. This is apparently just before they introduce themselves to Baragon, so this is literally moments before Aizen's takeover begins, essentially. And when Aizen saves Harribel, he's now wearing his post-Gotei 13 outfit with his slicked back hair. So that's what I mean by there's clearly some kind of a time skip here between the Baragon scene and the Hammerhead Arrancar scene. There possibly could have been one in between to make that jump a little bit clearer, but I think they did a good job with what they had, and it's nice that the anime actually gave us something, whereas in the manga, like I said, we got nothing, essentially. But that's it for this video on Harribel's backstory, the one we are given by the anime. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of Harribel's backstory that we received. Let me know what you thought of her design and the designs of her fractions. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. Let me know if you think that Aizen perhaps gave that same spiel to the Hammerhead Arrancar before bestowing him this immeasurable power. And what do you think of Baragon running a court like this? Again, very similar to what we see in his backstory, but it's just such a cool visual and a cool idea that maybe the Hollows never even really needed the intervention of the Shinigami. This is something that has been forced upon them, in a sense, to have a civilization of their own. Perhaps they're not the mindless beasts that the Shinigami think they are, but regardless, it's always fascinating to delve into the past of Hueco Mundo and just some of the older eras of Bleach in general. Alright guys, but until next time, I'll catch you later. And I'll see you then.